Okay, last week we were learning about Tainis Pasha Zachat, Tainis Esther, moving on into the actual day of Purim. Now the halachic says you're supposed to dress Bigdei Shabbos. On Purim you're supposed to wear Shabbos clothing. In Ma'ariv and in benching you add Alanisim. If you by mistake you left out Alanisim, you do not have to repeat not the benching, not the davening. In fact, there are opinions in halacha that say that what happens if you're behind the minyan, you're davening slower, and if you say Alanisim, you'll miss Kedusha. But if you skip Alanisim, you'll make Kedusha. So there are opinions in halacha that say that because if you forgot Alanisim, it doesn't matter. Kedusha is more important, so therefore they hold you should skip Alanisim in order to say Kedusha. We don't hold like that. The Rebbe writes, our minig is you daven regularly with Alanisim, you miss Kedusha, so you listen, you stop davening and you listen to Kedusha, but you don't skip Alanisim in order to make Kedusha. Now, after you finish the Megillah, we're learning the din soon of the Megillah. When you come home, this is your Thursday night, but here it doesn't matter if you're here and show Wednesday night. So after Ma'ariv anyway, we have food and dancing, so that's it. But technically, when you come home after Megillah reading, you're supposed to have not the su'ud of Purim, you're not yates at night, but you're supposed to have a little festive atmosphere in the home to eat something extra and things like that. But you're not yates at the su'ud at night. Okay, let's get to the dinim of reading the Megillah. Okay, now every person is obligated to hear the Megillah. Men, women, and children. Well, children is educational purposes. But men and women are equally obligated in listening to the Megillah. Therefore, there's a Megillah reading at night and there's a Megillah reading during the day. We mentioned that the halacha is that the Megillah reading of the day is really more important than the Megillah at night. So that people don't think though, they think, oh, the Megillah at night is the big thing. But the day one is more important than the night one. The night Megillah you can listen to anywhere from nightfall, which is like a half an hour after Shkia here, until dawn, until Amir HaShachar, which is 72 minutes approximately before sunrise. A whole day you can hear from sunrise to sundown. But it says in halacha, people that have to go to work or whatever it is, they can already hear the Megillah from Aleis HaShachar, from dawn, so it's not an issue.
What time is it now?
Sunrise and sundown is... I'll tell you, dawn is like 5:50 in new time. Shkia is sunrise is 7:01 and Shkia is 7:02. Exactly 12 hours later and 1 minute. Okay, anyway, you have to hear the whole Megillah. If you miss one word, you do not fulfill your obligation of the Megillah. So therefore, the halacha says like this. If you have a kosher Megillah and you know how to read the Megillah, you could read along together with the Balkori to listen to the Megillah. If you have a chumash or a printed Megillah which is not kosher, then you should not read along together with the Balkari. You should listen and follow in the script. Now what happened is another din which is relevant to this halacha, and that is the Megillah has to be read in sequence. You can't read a word, skip a word, and go back to another word. You have to read a mamish in order. So what happens, you're listening to the Megillah, and you miss a word, for whatever reason. Now, the Chazan the Balkari is already a few words later. Now, if you're going to just put in that word, then it's out of sequence. So what you have to do is you have to read from the printed text the word that you missed, and quickly catch up to where the Balkari is. Even though you're reading it from a printed text or a non-kosher Megillah, it doesn't matter. Because Al Pidin, up to half the Megillah, you're allowed to read in a non-kosher Megillah. B'diavad. So if bottom line, if somebody misses a word in the Megillah, and you have to be careful when they bang Haman, and then, there's noise, or there's kids making noise, there's issues with that. So you have to make sure you're able to hear every word of the Megillah. If you miss a word of the Megillah, then you have to say that word and catch up quickly to where the Bakari is at. Now, we mentioned the other day that even though a person is fasting, you're not allowed to break your fast until after the Megillah reading. So so the fast basically is a half an hour to 45 minutes after the time that you can technically break your fast. Now the preferred way of listening to the Megillah is Revam Hadras Melech when there's a lot of people. So rather than listening to it individually, the best thing is to listen to it in a shul, in a community where there's a lot of people, or at least you should have a minyan of people listening to the Megillah. Now, it's also a custom that when you have the Megillah...
Is it required to have a minyan to read them?
No, it's preferred, because it's just nicer when there's a bigger crowd. But if somebody needs to hear the Megillah privately, they could. Now, women cannot read the Megillah for men because it's what's called Kavod HaTzibur. But technically, let's say a woman knows how to read the Megillah, she's allowed to read it for other women. She's allowed to read it for other women. The difference is, let's say a man already heard the Megillah, and he's going home to read it for women, or he's going to somewhere else to read it for women. So normally the bracha is, Asher Kidshanu b'misveis v'tzivanu al mikra Megillah. But the poskim write that what happens if a woman is making a bracha, she doesn't say al mikra Megillah, she says lishmoya Megillah. Why? In the poskim write there's a Pri Chodesh that differs, but most poskim say that a woman says lishmoya Megillah, and the man you read al mikra Megillah. Why? Because by the man, the obligation is to read it, and the women have an obligation to hear it. But when you hear the reader, it's like you read it. So therefore, the men make the bracha mikra Megillah. The women, if you're reading for them and there's no men there, the best thing is the women make their own bracha instead of the person who heard it already. But if not, now, ideally, if you have a kosher Megillah, the custom is, some places only the Balkari does it, other places everybody who has a Megillah does it. You fold it over like a letter, because the Megillah is called twice, Igera Sazes. So it's called a letter. So the letter used to be in the olden time, they used to fold it. So there's a custom of folding the Megillah, if you see, different places. If not, you yaitza anyway, that's for sure not an issue. It's a minig that a person should do it. What? You cannot hear the Megillah through a microphone. You're not allowed to hear the Megillah through a telephone. You're not allowed to hear a Megillah through Zoom. It has to be, as we use the expression, the horse's mouth. It cannot be a mechanically reproduced voices. Those shuls that read Megillah from a microphone, it's a big halacha question if the yaitz or not.
But if
If you're close to the Balkare and you hear it from the horse's mouth, so to speak, that's fine.
Even if there's a microphone.
If there's a microphone, but you're listening to it from the person, you're not yaitz from the microphone. This is, by the way, this is one second. There's a tshuva in Minchas Elazar, and I mentioned this very often. In order to paskin a shaila in scientific things, you need to know halacha and you need to know science. If you know only one of the two, you can't make a ruling in scientific questions. In the Minchas Elazar held, it was a very great basic of the Munkacher, the Minchas Elazar held that you could hear it through a telephone. Why did he say that? Because he was misinformed the way a telephone works. He was told, you speak here, and the voice goes on the other end. Which is not true. No, it's not true. When you speak, the voice becomes mechanically reproduced, it goes through wiring, it's not your voice anymore. And then at the other end, it comes out, mechanically reproduced voice of what you sounded like. But it is not your voice.
He didn't know that?
He didn't know that. He was a guy in Munkach. Okay, so, and he was misinformed. But he was misinformed. There was a similar thing, one second, similar thing when in the 1950s, there was the Zim line. We mentioned this in the past. The Zim line were the Israeli ships. Huh? Okay, going from America to Israel, and Israel, because people didn't fly by plane that much in those years. And there was a whole shaila. Zimline was owned by the Israeli government. And there was a whole shaila, a Jew was allowed to go because the trip took more than a week. So the question is the Jew allowed to go on the Zim line on Shabbos? And the Moshe Feinstein, there was a big, it's printed already in the Igros Moshe and in the Rebbe's letters. There was a big dialogue, exchanging of letters, and then Moshe finally changed his mind because he was misinformed. Again, the same thing. And the question was, a Jew is not allowed to do a malacha for you on Shabbos. If a Jew does a malacha for you on Shabbos, you're not allowed to benefit from the malacha. The Zim line was owned by Jews and there were Jewish workers. The majority of the ship were Jewish people. The whole heter of people going on cruises today over Shabbos is because it's Reiv Goyim. The majority of people are Goyim, and therefore officially they're doing the malacha for the Goyim, not for the. But if you have a cruise that the majority of people are Yidden, you're not allowed to go on such a boat on Shabbos. So Ramesha was misinformed, but the science, not the halacha, God forbid. In the science, he was told that the boat can go 24 hours without any manual labor. You could set it for 24 hours.
Any attendance.
Yeah. The Rebbe, who happened to be an electrical engineer, he worked in the Navy Yards before he became, well, when he first came to America, the Rebbe worked in the Brooklyn Navy Yards. And the Rebbe said, with all the respect, it's probably not true. He said, I'm an engineer. It's impossible for a boat to be unmanned manually for 24 hours. And then when it was explained to the Moshe, he said, yeah, 100%, the Rebbe's right, that you're not allowed to go on the boat. So again, you have issues of science. What did you want?
How could it be that Megillah, that a woman could be against the other women, but by Kirsa she can't?
Because it's very simple. Women are not obligated in Kriyas HaTorah, and women are obligated in Megillah.
Because how you sign this?
Yeah, Afein Hayah Bais Din. So even though it's a mitzvah sasesha as man grama, it's connected to time. Nevertheless, the Gemara says Afein Hayah Bais Din, and therefore women are obligated. But that you only say by mitzvah Rabbanon, not by mitzvah Deraisa.
What's the mitzvah of Shmias Kriyas?
A mitzvah Shmias Kriyas HaTorah is a big discussion halacha. According to many poskim, that's what the Rebbe writes also. It's there's a chiv on a tzibur, not necessarily on a yochid. But women are not obligated in Kriyas HaTorah. Women don't have to hear Kriyas HaTorah. Women have to hear Megillah. And Kriyas HaTorah, you can't take out a Sefer Torah and for women to read. Here you're talking about a Megillah. You're not talking about a Sefer Torah. So halachically, women could read for other women, not for other men, because it's not covered at tzibur.
Why is it that by men is just Megillah and by women is...
That's what the poskim write, because the men is this Safei and by SNS, whatever, it's a difference. But they write that the women have a chiv shmiya and the men have a chiv kriya. So if you're reading for women after you already were yaitz from the Megillah, you have to they say the bracha l'shmaya Megillah. What?
Just to clarify, we have a minyan going on, but most people heard kriya from the previous minyan. So now you don't have 6 by this minyan, so you don't make...
Kriyas HaTorah or Kriyas Megillah?
Kriyas HaTorah.
No.
Just because there's a minyan going on, we don't have 6 people that didn't hear kriya yet, so...
As a general rule, there are poskim that say under dire circumstances, even if you don't have 6 new ones, they heard it, you could do it. But officially, the halacha, that's exceptional cases. Officially, you must have 6 people that didn't hear the kriya.
Women also say both brachas. Is it 2 brachas or
3.
3? They also say all 3?
Yeah, the bracha at the end, you only say if there's a minyan, so women don't say it.
They said that they said.
Huh?
They said they said.
The Rebbeim said it, not the women.
No, I'm saying
The Rebbeim said the bracha after.
Rebbeim. Only the Rebbeim?
Only the
The
Rebbeim.
Ramesh Feinstein, did he also hold like where the microphone?
Yeah.
would not-
Yeah, anybody that knows anything about microphones, you know that
he
you're not
said
allowed.
that there was an opinion that was...
I saw the Minchas Elazar, but it was misinformed.
So he was the only...
Somebody asked me today, it was after the fact, he says, if I want to make a minyan for Pasha Zachar, just Pasha Zachar. Can I do it? Like before Mincha, people, can I make a minyan? I mean, just for Pasha Zachar. I said, you crazy? You have to have Kriyas HaTorah, 7 aliyahs, and then you have mafta. What do you make a mafta without? Without the 7 aliyahs? Of course you can't. The mistake people make Aseret Dibros also. You have to do the whole Kriya with the Haftarah and everything. You can't just take out a Sefer Torah in a minyan and read Aseret Dibros or Parsha Zachar.
If women didn't hear it and
What?
came late to the shul.
Megillah?
Yeah, no, not Megillah. Parashat Zachor.
We discussed that already. Not everybody holds women have to hear it. If we hold women don't have to hear it.
But if a man didn't hear it, no,
If a man didn't hear it, so he's Yaitse Kriyas HaTorah, put him in the morning. It says he should listen to Kriyas HaTorah. Or if not, he says he just reads it from a Chumash. But you can't take out a Sefer Torah and do What?
Some say you don't yotze for Limud Torah if you do it over the phone or through recording.
No, Limud HaTorah, yeah, because the mitzvah is to learn Torah, learning and knowing Torah. Here you have an obligation to hear the
No, not
Megillah.
about Megillah, it's an tangent. Just
Learning Torah, you can do it through the phone, over the Zoom, whatever you want.
record
Because the mitzvah is to learn, you're learning. You're not doing anything but learning. What?
Okay, so the women still come in here because they accepted upon themselves to hear.
To hear what?
It's not a chiyuv in Dibros Zachor, but they accepted upon themselves.
Who said everybody accepted upon themselves?
No, it's a if.
Who
I
said?
thought you said that once at last year.
No, I didn't say it. You weren't here Thursday night when we learned it. The Rebbe said in the Sikha, the way the meaning is that women come. That didn't mean they accepted upon themselves that they have to do it. The fact is that women go to Parshat Zachor. That doesn't mean they have to hear it. They take words out of context to make a... Okay, anyway. So you have to listen to the Megillah. You have to answer Amen. You're not supposed to answer Baruch Hu Baruch Shmei when they make the brachas. You're only allowed to answer Amen. Again, if you want to read it for somebody else, okay. If a Megillah is missing, you can't be Yaitse.
Someone say Baruch Hu Shmai, and then I use it.
If somebody says in the brachas Baruch Hu Baruch Shmei, they bring down the Chasam Sefer held, let's put it this way. In the Chasam Sefer Shul, people used to say Baruch Hu Baruch Shmei, and he didn't protest, which meant that he held it was okay. Now, Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch comes out that if you need to be Yaitze something, and you say Baruch Hu Baruch Shmei, that you're probably not Yaitze. But over here, if you hear the Megillah without the brachas, you're still Yaitze the Megillah, right? If you're Havdalah and you say Baruch Hu Baruch Shmei, that's a different thing, because you have to hear the bracha. Here you have to hear the Megillah. If somebody walks into shul right when they finish the brachas, and they're right away starting to hear the Megillah, and you hear the whole Megillah, you're Yaitze the mitzvah. You didn't make the brachas. Like putting on film without a bracha, you still did the mitzvah. It's not an issue. Okay, to be continued.